Weather Wagers is back for yet another week. It's Halloween weekend, and we are excited to be talking about that. Some tricks, some treats in the weather. Not really.
Indeed.
Not really, but we have some tricks and treats in some of these games we're going to be talking about. It's a little spooky around here for Halloween. I'm excited.
I'm very excited. And, you know, it's Halloween. We are still talking about the Philadelphia Phillies. We're still talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, who are undefeated. And we're talking about a one-loss Penn State team. It is a great time for Pennsylvania sports.
And that is the theme. Let's go to our social media accounts first, because I want everybody, again, to know how they can find us, Dan. We are Brett Thacker and Dan Tomaso along with you here on Weather Wagers. You can find us on Facebook, meteorologist Brett Thacker and Dan Tomaso. Twitter. There are our Twitter handles at Brett Thack, ABC27, and Instagram, too. And you're Doppler Dan.
I am Doppler Dan, so I'm easy to find. No issues there whatsoever. I'm very active on game days, whether it's the Phillies, whether it's the Eagles, whether it's Penn State. So give us a follow. And, of course,
we'd like to interact with you. And
in between, we do our day jobs, too. We talk about weather.
We talk a lot about the weather, and we want to hear from you. Weatherwagers@gmail.com. If you have a great idea for a side wager we've had some fun with over the course of the last couple of weeks, we don't have one to pay off this week, but we want some ideas, some crazy, kooky ideas for a side wager. Send us an email, weatherwagers@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on social media. So that is the fun of all of this.
That is the fun.
Because, we've had to wear Mets gear. We've had to wear Cowboys gear. I hate to eat some spicy wings. We just want to hear from you. And some of you have come up with some decent ideas, so keep them coming, and we may implement them down the road. So it is the end of the month right now. This podcast is going to be focused on Pennsylvania sports.
Because why not? I mean, it's very, very rare air that we're in, that all of the teams that we follow here are also on the same page. And I want to bring in our audio engineer. He's been with us the last few weeks. Here's Dave Shiner. Dave, always wearing his Phillies hat, always talking birds. Dave?
Hey, how's it going, guys? I actually got a hot mic here today. This is kind of crazy.
Well, we didn't know if it would work, and then we didn't want to jinx it. But now at this point, the Phillies are in the series.
Yep.
They're in the what?
Penn State. The World Series.
I was going to say, I can't even believe those words are coming out of our mouths.
I can't either. And we've watched a lot of bad baseball in 11 years. In fact, most of us have watched a lot of bad baseball in our whole lives.
As a Phillies fan, sure.
So this is exciting. The Eagles are undefeated. They
only undefeated team in the NFL.
That's like the big one right now, I think. I mean,
and then if Penn State would somehow upset Ohio State, probably not going to happen, but if they would, they control their destiny at least on one level, because they're still alive. They would only have one loss.
Very alive.
It feels like a dream.
This was one of the craziest sports weekends of my life that I can remember, where so many things were happening in Pennsylvania sports at the same time. I mean, I know we were all texting during the Penn State and Phillies game, and like touchdowns and home runs were happening at the exact same time.
Rapid
I didn't
pace.
know where to look on the TV. It was crazy.
There's too many good things happening, fellas. There's too many good things happening. There's too many good vibes. So don't worry. That's where I come in.
Oh, you're going to kill it?
Are you the jinx here?
Well,
what's
no,
going
I'm not.
on?
I just want to keep it real. This could all come crashing down at any moment. And so we will talk about that. Right now, though, we do want to review last week. I'll tell you what, Dan, we had a great week last week. It is very tough to pick games against the spread, as you know. I'm happy that I bounced back 7-2 last week.
Look at you.
Yeah. You also had a good 6-3 is nothing to sneeze at, so we roll on here. Syracuse and Clemson, we both got it right. Syracuse kept that one close. I did not. I don't know why this did save my check mark there, but that should be a big old red X next to UCLA.
How about that?
You, on the other hand, thought Oregon could do it, and quack, quack, the Ducks are back.
And they are a playoff contender. Now, their only loss is against Georgia.
Yeah, and I think that, it was a very bad loss, 49-3, but I think you have to allow for the fact that teams can get better. They just beat that top 10 UCLA team, and here's the key: they look good doing it. So that should be a big red X next to my UCLA. They let me down, the chip ship.
Could you imagine if there was an August preseason for college football? What would have that first game lived up to if, say, Oregon was more acclimated?
I think it's incredible what they have been able to do. So they roll on Minnesota, Penn State. Penn State, I said they had to prove it to me that they could bounce back after a loss, and they did it in a big way. So kudos to you for sticking with the Nittany Lions, and they rolled.
All the way. I was never in doubt.
No, you weren't. You were confident. They proved it. We both got the Commanders. They won outright. The Packers are trash, and they just continue to show it. As for the next game on our list, Panthers-Bucks, I didn't fault you for taking the Bucks, but, I mean, let's face it, they're pretty trashy too.
There's something wrong.
It's two old men that are playing quarterback that refuse to give up.
I think there's some rat poison in that Buccaneers organization right now.
Yeah, it's bad. The Panthers did keep that one more than close as they won outright as well. UNLV snuck in a win for me against the Irish.
And you covered.
Well, that's what I mean. You got the win because you picked Notre Dame money line, but I think it was a 25-point. I think Notre Dame won by 23. So they were able to kind of sneak that one in.
I'm shocked that Notre Dame even scored 25 points based on what they had coming into that game.
Yeah, it was a fun one. Ohio State, of course, blasted Iowa. LSU is a force to be reckoned with.
Yes, they are.
And they have to play Alabama at home in the next couple of weeks. So that could be a game. The SEC West still a little bit open, and then Kansas State let me down. TCU.
How about those Horned Frogs?
Tell you what, Max Dugan.
Player.
Could be a Heisman contender.
And he wasn't even the projected starter coming into the year.
Sonny Dykes and the TCU Frogs are rolling. And we're going to talk more about them. And then your pick, Stanley, give us a wrap on those.
Well, the Doppler Dandies did not go dandy for me. I was a believer at Air Force and the amount of rushing yards they were putting up per game, but Boise State came in there.
They crashed.
And the poor Air Force team, they crashed.
They didn't look good.
Speaking of being spooked, our guy Mike Leach said, if you want to scare his Bulldog team, show up as Alabama.
Yeah, just put on an Alabama uniform. And this was the perfect game because there's a lot going on right now with Alabama. And not only have they not looked great, there's been a lot of penalties. And then you have this Burton situation where something weird happened on the field where, he hit that girl. And Nick Saban came out this week and said, well, he was scared.
Scared of what, Nick?
That was a weird line for Nick to say, and then Nick said he was scared. And Nick, you're surrounded by state troopers.
Yes.
Okay, I get it. It can be a scary situation, and Saban's upset with the league and the Tennessee athletic department for allowing that to happen. But listen, it happens. People are going to rush the field. You know that. But this is kind of a weird time for Alabama, and Saban taking a lot of criticism for that statement.
I would be careful if I were him. Remember what undid Urban Meyer at Ohio State being tone deaf.
Well, yeah, he's got to be careful, and I think too that he could have ended this in a better way than he did. So there's a lot that would suggest is Alabama on a precipice here, but here's the deal. This Mississippi State game said to me, no way. They came out, they covered that large number. They're not going anywhere. And it's possible they're right back in the SEC title game with one loss, and away we go.
I heard some of the pundits saying if there was a game for Alabama to afford to lose, it was the Tennessee game.
I agree, because they're in the East, and they've got a tough game this week. We're going to talk about that one. And then how about the New York Jets? Speaking of a team that didn't crash, they flew.
They did not. They did. They flew, and could they be a real contender now with Miami and their issues going on?
And New England.
And New England, of course. The Jets could win a division. How about that?
Yeah, Buffalo's not invincible. I don't know that they're going to win the division, but they're in there. They're 5-2. What are they? 5-2, 6-2.
Well, and
what are they?
They're good enough to be at least a wild card team.
I think you're right, at least if they keep playing like that. So the records as they stand right now, this is for the pie-in-the-face bet at the end of the season. I'm hanging tough.
You are hanging tough.
And again, to be above 500 against the spread is not too shabby. I will take that all day, 41-39. You're 45-35. Not too bad, my friends.
Well, you could be like the Phillies. You could start slow, and you could ramp up as the season goes on.
Yeah,
so
we're only about midway through this.
I could be the Mets and collapse.
You could be the Mets. I hope not. I'd like some competition, but I think we're both doing just fine. And, again, this is why we kind of want to hear from you, our listeners and our viewers. What is our next side wager? What should that be? Maybe we'll come up with one before the end of this week. If not, we want to hear from you because those are fun, and we just have fun talking about this and doing it. So, all right, let's go over some news and notes this week, and we're going to get into it. If you like Pennsylvania sports, then you've found the right place. Again, we don't limit ourselves. This podcast is about weather and how it relates to sports, and also about our passions when we talk about sports. So, if you're listening to us and you hate the Phillies, great, bring it on.
Yeah.
But this week you're going to have to endure a lot of this Philly sports talk and Pennsylvania sports talk because it's a big weekend.
It's a huge weekend.
I do want to go back, and I want to talk about the Philadelphia Phillies. And we have some extra time this week, so this is going to be a longer episode, but why not? We've earned it. We've earned the right to talk about the Phillies because for the last 11 years, you get to September and we don't talk about the Phillies anymore. These Phillies are World Series bound. Now, say that again, and you have always been a big believer in this team.
I have.
But, Dan, you have to admit it was tough at times this season.
Oh, for sure.
I'm just going to ask you about three different things. The first one, Girardi failing, and this team 21 and 29, they looked, or something like that. They looked like they were going to be left for dead. What happened there? So that's the first point. That's the first crux I want to talk about.
Well, I think it goes back to every team has a different dynamic, a different chemistry, and for whatever reason, if Girardi was tight and tightly wound, he was in a contract year, he was kind of a lame duck manager in many ways. If the team sensed that, as the slow start kind of compiled, you could tell on his face he hated losing. And he always said that we'll bounce back, we'll find a way out of this, and there was a time in those first 2 months that he said, we got to go on the road. We got to get out of Citizens Bank Park. We have to find a way to win again. And they did go on a run, but then they fell back again right before he got canned. For whatever reason, Rob Thompson was the guy kind of always in the background. Yes, the old Canadian, 59 years old, getting a chance after being on a Yankee staff for years. There's a great story about him meeting George Steinbrenner kind of in the hollows of Yankee Stadium and how George told him to keep going. And it kind of motivated his career that George Steinbrenner paid attention to him as a low-level employee with the Yankees, as a low-level coach. And for whatever reason, he never got his chance until this year. And it's either his calm demeanor, his kind of low blood pressure, and just letting these guys do their thing. It's a veteran squad. Kyle Schwarber, Bryce Harper are the leaders of the team. It all clicked at the right time.
It's funny because he is so calm, or at least he appears to be on the outside.
He looks the same every time the camera pans him. He looks exactly the same.
You know, what does that tell you, too, about just sometimes in life? Sometimes you have to wait for your moment. And sometimes your moment may not come until you're 59 years old.
How about that?
But it comes.
It does.
And I think it's a fantastic story. Okay, the second crux happened when, Harper goes down. He gets hit. The thumb happens. It was his thumb, correct?
Yes, got hit on the thumb.
And then he goes out for how long?
And by the way, that was against the San Diego Padres.
Correct. Well, and again, these things have, in baseball especially, these things have a weird poetry about them. But he goes out for, I think it was at least a month, maybe longer, right? And they had some serious questions. Okay, how are they going to go on now without their guy, without their star, without their Michael Jordan type? What's going to happen? Well, guess what? They survived that.
And baseball is a sport where it's more than the 26 guys on the roster because they ended up bringing up a Derek Hall from the minor leagues who had never gotten his chance either, but a big power hitter, and all of a sudden he had a power surge. They make a few key trades at the deadline. Edmundo Sosa coming in, kind of unheralded as a trade, but Dave Dombrowski said, we need more defense in the infield. Great. Bryson Stott, all of a sudden showing his bat, showing his skills.
And a side note for me, because I'm somebody, you fall in love with these guys in a way.
Yes, you do.
I loved Didi Gregorius.
I know.
But the reality of it is hard to argue with the move that was made to bring in Stott.
Yeah, and again, they paid money to get rid of Didi Gregorius to make room for Stott because they saw enough improvement out of the rookie.
Right.
So that was huge, too. And then finally, the big trade of all, I think, was Brandon Marsh because it solidified center field.
Big defensive get, but he also contributed with his bat in this series.
Did.
But again, going back to the Bryce Harper, how did you manage that without him in there? They believed in themselves, right?
And even going back to the beginning of the season, when he came up with his arm lame, I knew something wasn't right with his elbow, just the way he was kind of feeling around with it. So that was back in April. And he had to be removed from the outfield, become a full-time DH. I thought that could be a big turning point in the season because all of a sudden Nick Castellanos, who was not supposed to play in the outfield, was forced into duty. Everything that kind of led up to his thumb injury, they just kept filling the holes. They kept finding ways to win.
And the third crux of the season really came in September. This is a team that knew that it was on the verge of making the playoffs. And they started their collapse again.
They started to get tight.
They lost some games to the Nationals. They got swept by the Chicago Cubs.
They did.
Okay,
swept out by the season.
Yeah,
mind you, against the Chicago Cubs.
That's That's
was bad.
unbelievable.
It was bad.
So then, when everybody kind of wrote them for dead, they kind of sneak into the playoffs. But what were you thinking in September watching this? Because again, I will tell the audience that you still kind of believed that they were going to get in and be okay, but it was concerning.
The two horses is the reason why I thought all along they would pick it back up. And the injury to Zach Wheeler was huge. We didn't know if we were getting him back. He had forearm tendonitis, which is bad news for a pitcher. And he came back healthy and strong, obviously, just in time for the playoffs. Plus, Sir Anthony Dominguez. They had to shut down for an injury.
Yes.
He came back, and he looked rough from the start. He didn't really go through a full rehab process, but his rehab was kind of live in games, and now look at him. And the other unsung hero, too, which I've always liked him, and I wanted him to put it together, Jose Alvarado.
Yeah, he's really done well.
What a beast of a human being.
He is. He doesn't have the body tape for a relief pitcher, does he? He looks more like a linebacker.
He does look like a linebacker, but man, does he pump fastballs. Now, Dave, you were wanting to chime in. So what are your thoughts on these 3 points?
Well, the first thing, I think we have to thank the MLB for allowing the DH in the
Unreal.
NL, because honestly, if that wasn't a component this year, this team would have not done what they did. That allowed them to move people around and get that, like, it's
a big change
in
though
there
for traditionalists. But I don't know that it really hurt
Bryce
the game.
In the lineup, and allowed, even when he was out, for us to insert some players here and there. But this team is just, it's a Philadelphia team. Like it. I hate saying this, but it's giving me 2008 vibes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like the catchphrase, but they remind me, like, even like a guy like Marsh who comes in with the big beard. He looks like the John Crucker of the day, like something like that. And we got these personalities, and
it's a good comparison.
I just think these guys love playing the sport, and you can see that once they knew they were in, it was like, all right, now it's time to let's go.
They're like little kids, and I think that's what, when you have a team that gels like that, it's like a bunch of 7 or 8 year old boys. You're transported back to that moment
when it's fun.
And I think that makes a difference. So let's break down the Phillies and the Astros here a little bit and talk about this unbelievable run. So now we move into the playoffs, and all of a sudden this team gets hot, and everybody has contributed. I mean, that's the other thing here, guys. I just look at this lineup, and it's like, okay, Schwarber started out slow, but then he started to get on fire. You've had Alec Boehm have moments. You've had
who loves this city, by the way.
Great quote.
Funny how that changed real quick, huh?
Yes, but yet the city still embraced him, and he owned it when he said that. But what a poetic storyline that was. Gene Segura had his game. Rhys Hoskins has had his moments. Again, Brandon Marsh had a home run.
Yeah.
I mean, they've all done it. And then you've got, again, that Michael Jordan moment where Bryce Harper comes up, and I knew what was going to happen.
Chills.
You just knew it was going to happen. And he does it in a grand way, and then they're able to close out the game thanks to, how great is Ranger Suarez?
Yo, that guy.
Cool as a cucumber.
I think he's the only person that is, like, cooler than the manager.
I mean, for him to come into that game cold and field that bunt.
Two pitches.
Yeah.
Field that bunt and get, of all people, Aaron Nola's brother to fly out.
Just, again, crazy storylines here. But the run has been amazing, but now we run into a team that –
a juggernaut.
They're not quite the best in baseball. That was the Dodgers record-wise. But this team, they are playing for Dusty.
Yep. Dusty wants a World Series.
He wants a World Series. They have the pitching. They have the batting. They have not lost in the postseason. This team reminds me of the Yankees back in the day when they were going on their runs.
The Jeters, the Paul O'Neills.
Now, because you just, it's like, oh gosh,
Wait, did you say Jeters or cheaters?
Well, that too.
Well, they are. Well, and that was my next question. Can I say this? Are the Phillies America's team? Because everybody hates the Astros. They want them to lose.
You got to wonder.
I mean, everybody hates Philadelphia until they love us. Because
we're the underdog.
They hate Houston.
Yep.
Because they cheated.
They did cheat. Now, the only thing I will say is the team is a lot different than it was during those supposed scandal years, except Jose Altuve is still there, who did not have a good series in the LCS against the Yankees. But they are so loaded. I mean, whether it's their starting pitching, their bullpen is elite, it's going to be harder for the Phillies to score runs in this series.
So do you think the Phillies, though, have a chance to put a cap on this.
The only way they have a chance, my friend, is if they take advantage of every time the man named Aaron Nola or the man named Zach Wheeler take the mound, because you have to win those games. The in-between games are going to cause the Phillies a lot of trouble, I think.
Yeah, it's one thing to be hot, and you can be. Now, they've had a little break. That always worries me, too.
That worries me, too.
But they've been able to execute in big moments. And I think something else that we can all relate to is when we've watched a lot of big moments over the years, we've been stressed and then ultimately disappointed.
Yes.
However, this particular team does not give me the stress that I've had in the past.
I do agree there.
They
seems like
have
never
made it
down
look
and
a
out.
little too easy. Even when they got down and out in that first inning against the Padres 4-0. Okay, 27 outs. They come out. All of a sudden, it's 4-3.
Yep.
If they keep playing that way, and maybe that's a big if, but they do appear to be a team of destiny, a team that is on this major run. But I agree. I think Houston is a juggernaut. And most importantly, you cannot leave Houston down 0-2.
Correct.
Yeah, you got to steal one.
Got to steal one.
One thing about this, though, is even the stress that comes with watching the games, anytime either Schwarber or Harper are at the plate, you're not as worried. You think you know one swing, and you can watch it as they're getting their pitches. Like when Bryce hit that home run to take the lead, in Game 5, you could see as soon as he took that first swing at that fastball, he's like, oh, he's close. Then he fouls it off. Oh, he's closer.
Yeah.
Don't give him another one. And what did they do?
And
they
he took that
pitched to him.
changeup. He took the changeup.
Oh,
and
he laid
spit on
off of it.
Yeah.
How do you lay off that pitch?
And
unless you're an
Just
all-star.
in the zone.
By the way, this is a great point, and then we'll move on here. But you guys probably know a little bit more about the mechanics of baseball than I do. But, yes, he did hit the home run, but how good, in your opinion, was that at bat? I mean, that's why he was in the position to hit the home run. He's a good hitter, right? So you talk about the fact that he can now kind of see these pitches and know what's coming. And he was able to foul off several ones. And then he takes that changeup, which I don't think a lot of hitters would do. And so
No.
I don't think
It looks
can
like a
be
fastball coming in. That's why it's so deadly.
correct. And then it just sinks. And so I got to give the guy a lot of credit, because to me, the fact that this is all kind of a chess match, that at-bat and the at-bats that he's been having leads to these big moments. He's not just getting up there and swinging, right? It's calculated.
100%. And I think his swing rate is 63% right now, or something insane in his at-bats, and he's making contact when he swings.
Yeah.
It is just incredible. We are going to talk more about this series coming up, because, in fact, the first two games in Houston are part of our Games of the Week. We will get to that. But more talk now. Let's go to the Eagles, because they are undefeated. And, Dan, one of the things that we get to do now is welcome in a Pittsburgh Steelers team. Talk about a Pennsylvania weekend. The Pittsburgh Steelers stink.
Can he throw a picket?
How rare is it to get an Eagles team that's humming and a Steelers team that ain't?
Eagles coming off a bye. Eagles coming off one of their best games of the season to this point. I don't see how the Steelers have a chance. But if somehow, some way, you keep the game close through 4 quarters, you do have to worry about that Pittsburgh defense and run game.
Well, you never write anybody out in the NFL. They just beat up the Bucs, although, again, I don't think the Buccaneers are very good. But we get them at home. Again, I'd be more concerned if this was at Acrisure Stadium. But I do think that at the Link, the Eagles humming, Sirianni coming off a bye week, let's do it. Let's get these guys ready to go. This could be a fun game to watch. I mean, the Eagles have found their quarterback.
I think the Eagles have found their quarterback. They have found their wide receiver 1. They have found their running back.
They have an O-line.
They have an O-line, which Lane Johnson should be back. They should be back. They should be back to full strength.
Okay, so let's talk. Did you?
I just wanted a little Eagles trivia for you here.
Yes.
Let's see if you guys know the answer. When was the last time the Steelers beat the Eagles in Philadelphia?
The last time the Steelers beat the Eagles in Philadelphia.
I don't even know the last time they've played in Philadelphia, to be honest.
Well, no.
I feel like I've always remembered the road
Was it the
games.
year they won the Super Bowl?
No, that was in Steeltown.
Okay.
It was actually 1965.
Whoa.
No way.
Yes,
Wow.
October 24th, 1965.
That's unreal.
I think it was actually at Franklin Field.
You're kidding.
Nope.
Sounds like a Ruben Frank stat.
So we've got history on our side now.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
That is pretty incredible. Now, speaking of that, I do want to go to the Eagles' schedule because, the nice part of it is we've the tough part of our schedule is over for now. So the Eagles play the Steelers this weekend, Halloween weekend. Okay, hopefully nothing spooky at the link. Then, now think about this. Okay, the Phillies play Friday and Saturday. The Eagles then play Sunday. Philadelphia comes home Monday, Tuesday, you hope Wednesday, and the Eagles are on Thursday Night Football.
Against?
The Texans.
The Houston Texans.
How does this all
Lovie
line
Smith.
up?
It really is funny.
I just hope the city doesn't burn before it's over.
Well, that's very
Spooky.
true. Hopefully the Phillies are up in the series by that point.
Then we return after Thursday Night Football. It looks like a Monday night game, so that's a nice gap for them. The Commanders come to town. So you've got the Steelers, the Texans, and the Commanders. No world beaters there.
Nope.
Then you have the Colts.
And again, they're switching quarterbacks. They're going away from the Matt Ryan era already.
You're right. Yeah.
Matty Ice on ice.
And who are they bringing in?
I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you.
Not sure it matters, but I did read this, and now I'm blanking. We're
It's a
going to
guy
have
I didn't know much about. I'll tell you that.
we're going to have
much.
Shiner on it here, but
I think he's the former Texas quarterback, if I remember right.
really?
Yes.
Well, they do still have Nick Foles on staff.
Well, they
you
do.
never know if
Philly special.
He's getting
our
paid
guy's
by
gonna
three
be-
different organizations, probably.
Correct.
At this point.
Yeah. Sam Ellinger.
Yep.
Oh, yeah,
So
Sam
the former
Ellinger.
Texas
Okay.
guy. So a nobody. Truly a nobody.
I can't argue. Then the Packers come to town. That looks like a Sunday night game. And I mean, I'm not scared of the Packers. Then the Titans, and then we get into some more divisional games at the end of the year. So, listen, this is a stretch run of Steelers, Texans, Commanders, Colts, Packers.
There's a lot of games in there they don't have to win.
Well, yeah, there's a lot of games in there they don't have to win, but a lot of games they should win.
They should win, but
Just
it won't
on
affect
paper.
the division
On
if they
paper.
lose some of these AFC crossover games.
Yeah. So
From what I've seen, too,
that's unbelievable.
I believe it looks like they're going to be favored in every game
Yeah.
for the rest of the season at this
No,
point.
they should be. Although let's keep an eye, and I know this sounds weird, but we have to keep an eye on the New York Football Giants. You've heard of
Who?
them. You've heard of them.
I know
And
about the
heard,
Jags.
You've heard of the Giants. They are, what are they, 6-1, 7-1?
Yeah.
They have Saquon Barkley. You may have heard of him.
They're winning a lot of close games, though, and I do feel like eventually that catches up with the team.
It does, but listen, you can make fun of Daniel Jones, but I like Brian Daboll. So let's see how this plays out. And hey, listen, guys, if the Eagles and the Giants have meaningful games at the end of the year, that's not a bad
That's great.
thing. All right, let's move on. We want to talk about the whiteout review, Penn State. I was wrong here, and I'm glad to be wrong because, I said that, let's be honest, we got our butts handed to us in the big house, and then James Franklin has not been great off of a loss, trying to get his team psychologically ready for what comes next. The whiteout, of course, had a big help with that. Tanner Morgan not playing had a big help with that. But the reality is, Penn State came out, they punched Minnesota in the mouth.
They certainly did.
They got a hard-fought victory. The offense looked good. The defense looked good. Special teams looked good. It was fun. And that's going to set them up now. They're 13th in the country. They only have one loss. A lot of what you said, there's that lion. A lot of what you said came true.
And I go back to Sean Clifford, 6-year senior. Do you think he wants to go out in flames? I don't think so. And for as much as people want to complain about him, it's a very much what have you done for me lately fan base. I mean, they did beat a good Purdue team on the road. Purdue could win the West still.
Yeah.
That's a good win. It's a good win to go down to Auburn.
Any conference road game is a good win.
Right.
I don't care if it's Rutgers.
It's a good win to go down to Auburn and shove them around. Now, this offense in this game was more reminiscent of the Auburn game. I really think, unfortunately, there were a lot of things going on in that Michigan week leading up to it. First of all, there was some trash talking. There was a problem there at halftime where there was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich thrown or something of that nature.
I know. And then you have Harbaugh saying that James Franklin was an instigator. I mean, let's come on.
It's getting a little bush league, but I just think they were probably too hyped coming into that game off a bye, and there were too many guys trying to play hero, trying to win the game on their own. What I saw on Saturday was a team that was more united, where everybody was contributing. The tight ends were contributing, go figure. The running backs were contributing.
Yep.
Parker Washington got his first touchdown. Mitchell Tinsley looked good. That's what needs to happen here in this upcoming week. And one of the things that keeps being brought up is, as Penn State, do you recruit to try to beat Ohio State, which is what they have seemed to be doing over the last couple of years, or do you recruit more of the Big Ten Midwestern style of the big boys up front and the running game? And I think that's kind of where Penn State's caught in between, that they're competitive against these high-scoring teams in the Ohio States of the world, but when it comes to a physical game, they're not as competitive.
Yeah.
So it's a Jekyll and Hyde kind of situation.
But at the same time, too, it's not like they've beaten Ohio State either. So I think it is, but clearly the running game was working again, especially in the second half. Clifford looked good. He was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week. Franklin reminded the media of that this week. So,
I loved it.
I think ultimately it sets up a showdown that, at the very least, and Franklin did talk about this too with the Michigan game, you're giving yourself an opportunity to play in a big game. Now, let's talk about Ohio State because they look good. But one of the things we should do, to be fair here, is let me bring up their schedule, because I ultimately think, and I've got it here, they haven't really played a lot of people. Now, I'm not suggesting they're gonna be in a dogfight here either with Penn State. But guys, they beat Notre Dame, which again does not look that great. I mean, Notre Dame's not that great. Then it was Arkansas State, Toledo, Wisconsin, who is not a very good team this year, Rutgers, Michigan State, who is not a very good team this year, and then Iowa. I mean, that is not a murderer's row of teams. So I'm not even sure what their best win is on there. Notre Dame?
And I heard from several of those pundits I mentioned earlier that this could be Ohio State's toughest test until the Michigan game.
Oh, it has to be. Because, number one, they have to come into Beaver Stadium. Now, it's not a whiteout. It's not a night game. But you texted me something late last week. I don't know. Maybe, it's early. It's a noon game. Maybe you trap them a little bit. I mean, it's possible. I will say this, though, and we'll talk more about the game because it is one of our picks of the week. But Ohio State just looks like a complete team.
They look like a national championship contender. And the biggest factor in all this is we don't have a C.J. Stroud.
No.
And it's been an Ohio State tradition almost to keep bringing in quarterbacks like this. But let me take you back down memory lane here under James Franklin. So obviously they won 24-21 in 2016. That's the lone victory against Ohio State going back to 2012. 2017, Penn State loses 39-38. We all remember that game. 2018, 27-26, Penn State loses. So two back-to-back years, 1 point. 1 point loss. 2019, a Sean Clifford year, 28-17. 2020, the COVID year, we made it a touchdown game with the battering ram of Will Levis in the game. And then last year, against, again, a Penn State team that probably didn't have all their pieces in place, 33-24. Penn State has played Ohio State the closest in that time frame of any school in the Big Ten, except for Michigan winning last year.
Yeah, because Michigan was getting blown out every year until last year. It's a good point. I'm not sure it means a heck of a lot just in terms of, because at the end of the day, there's still Larry's in the paper and you get that L, and it doesn't mean a heck of a lot. But
a two-loss season, given the rest of Penn State's schedule.
Yeah, so
would you guys take that, a two-loss season?
Yeah, listen, if I said to you, right, at the beginning of the year, look, Clifford's going to have his ups and downs, but at the end of the day, we're going to be 10-2. You fight for a good bowl game. You have some generational talent coming through. Mm-hmm. You didn't know after the last 2 years what you would be. I think we all would have taken that.
Yeah, anytime you have a two-loss season, I know, the Ohio States and the Bamas of the world, that's like a horrible thing. But if we can keep close, I mean, I think we need to look at the fact that I was skeptical, but I think Michigan is the real deal.
I think so, too.
I mean, they're that smash-mouth football team that can give you fits, and we'll see what happens with them in Ohio State later. But yeah, you say two-loss team. Yeah, okay, we did okay. Now it does sting if those two losses are Michigan and Ohio State.
Sure.
Yeah, and you've got to keep grinding. I mean, you've got to keep grinding. But at the end of the day, you can't fault a 10-win season. However,
I would even say I think this is kind of the ceiling of the program with a 4-team playoff. I really do, because the playoff system rewards the same programs over and over again. Give this 2 years' time. A two-loss Penn State team could be in the playoff.
They're probably in a 12-teamer playoff. So let's talk about the schedule coming up, because I was going to say that all sounds good, but here's the situation. Typically, the other issue is that Penn State will lose a game it shouldn't.
Sure.
Now, that has not happened this year yet. The Ohio State game is this weekend. And again, for all of the crying and the whining of our fan base, including some by us. It is a number 2 team facing a number 13 team. It is a very good matchup.
It's the position you want to be in.
Yep. Then Penn State has to go to Indiana. Tricky always, but Indiana not the best. Then Maryland comes to Penn State. Maryland can always get you 2. They're still having some issues, and again, they have to come to Happy Valley.
And Talia is having some injury issues, which could play huge into that matchup.
Yeah, we just don't know. Again, these coaches keep everything so close to the vest. And then Rutgers on the road, and then Michigan State at home. Again, no world beaters there. Could Penn State get tripped up? Absolutely. We played Northwestern, and we looked like absolute garbage. So it's possible that they get tripped up.
Well, and turnovers are the great equalizer. If you turn the ball over, if you don't take care of the program, as James Franklin would say,
yeah,
you get yourself in trouble.
But it's all about this week, and we're going to talk more about that game coming up. One note on this game, though, and I want to mention this.
Yeah, I want to hear this. This is good stuff.
Because, we'll just give our picks later, but I want to get this in here now that, Mike Yursich, the offensive coordinator for Penn State.
Our guy from Shippensburg University.
Yes, sir. He was the offensive coordinator at Texas in 2020. He beat Jim Knowles' Oklahoma State defense that year, 41-34. Jim Knowles, of course, now is on Ohio State. He's their defensive coordinator. They brought him in. It was kind of a defensive coordinator sweepstakes last year. We thought maybe we were going to get Jim Knowles. Ohio State brought him in. We brought in Manny Diaz. Now, both Jim Knowles and Mike Yursich were on Gundy's staff in 2018. Yursich knows Jim Knowles well. I will leave that at that. All right, let's go to, I just want to hear a quick comment from each of you about this fall so far for these teams, the teams that we know, that we are fans of, and we try not to let that cloud our judgment here on this podcast. As I just showed you, picked against Penn State last week. They proved me wrong. Just a quick sentence or two about where we are so far this fall with the Phillies headed to the World Series, the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles, and Penn State welcoming in Ohio State, vying for the Big Ten East. I mean, where are we at? Let's start with Dave Shiner.
Well, I always joke that you're never going to hit the Pennsylvania parlay. So out of the 4 PA teams, Phillies, Eagles, Penn State, and who am I missing here?
Steelers.
Oh, yeah.
You're never going to get all of them to win on the same weekend, and it actually looks like that might come to fruition for once. So if you are a betting man, and this is weather wagers,
it is, yes.
Maybe you do a little teaser here with all of our teams here.
Ooh, that'd be tough. We'll get into our picks, but it's just all the memories, all of the pent-up frustration has led us. The angst has led us to, at least for today, a very good point. And I'll give my thoughts in a second. But, Dan, for you, growing up as a fan of all these teams, where we're at just at this moment before these games kick off, I mean, how great is it?
Well, it's also the way the teams are playing. It's fun right now. The Phillies are playing fun baseball. We're not talking about 1-2-run wins for the most part. We're talking about sometimes offensive explosions. We're talking about very good starting pitching and very good bullpen work. As you said, almost to the point where it's relaxing, which is weird. The Eagles also playing somewhat relaxing football. They never seem out of it. They never seem down and out. It doesn't seem like the Andy Reid years where you had alligator arm wide receivers. You got boys out there. I mean, you got some big...
How about men?
Yeah, big men out there at wide receiver, big men at tight end. And then also the running game of both the Eagles and the Penn State Nittany Lions, one of the linchpins there of fan frustration over the years that neither team could run the ball at points. Both seem to be figuring it out. Now, I still love the Eagles' offensive line. I love how they push and pull people around. They can pass block, they can run block, and again, it makes for fun football. Penn State may not have that offensive line yet, but they showed me something against a bigger Minnesota defensive line. It's fun.
It is fun, and for me personally, I would watch the Phillies with my dad's mother, my grandmother, and my mom's father, my grandfather on the other side. They were big Phillies fans. It was fun. And again, growing up, watched a lot of bad baseball.
Yes.
So when 2008 happened, it was magic. This year has that same vibe, Shiner, as you said. And so I just hope we can see that because now I have a son, and we've been watching these games. And for me growing up, somebody else used to watch, and Shiner, you know this too, Michael Jordan. And he would just do these things, and I'd be sitting on the couch with my dad, and we would be just knowing and waiting for Michael Jordan to do something. What's he going to do tonight? And that's what my son and I have done this past October here with Bryce Harper. What is he going to do tonight? And it has just been an incredible feeling. Same with the Eagles being this late into the season, being undefeated. There's a magic about that. And let's see if the Nittany Lions and James Franklin have any magic tricks and treats up their sleeve this Halloween weekend to see if they could pull off another stunner against what I think is a very good Ohio State team. So my final thought on this, and I will bring you guys back down to earth, because as much fun as this is, come Monday morning, we could be facing a Penn State blowout. We could be facing a Steelers shocking upset at the Link, and then we could be facing the Phillies coming back to Philly 0-2 against the Astros. These are all real possibilities. You just hope they don't happen.
I think we'll get one. We won't get both. I feel
or
that
all
way.
Three.
Or all three.
Yeah.
I think Penn State probably is in, a situation they don't want to be in, with whether it be quarterback play or the defense. They just don't have it all quite together yet.
Maybe that Yurcich note, though. Maybe he can out-scheme Jim Knowles. I mean, who knows?
That's why he was brought in, by the way.
Correct, a schemer.
Well, and it's also that big noon kickoff, too, that, as much as I wish the Ohio State game was that whiteout.
Just don't know how that's going to have an impact either way. But
clearly
it didn't work for Penn State when they had to go on the road.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the same thing for Ohio State. We can dream. Anyway, let's get into it. It is time for
Games of the Week.
These are the games of the week. We picked 5, and we're going 3 college and then 2 specials. We've got the Ohio State-Penn State game at big noon. That game is an Ohio State favorite by over 2 touchdowns. Kentucky-Tennessee. Dan, we've mentioned this. Tennessee, one of the great stories of college football this year.
Good old Rocky Top.
Rocky Top, Tennessee. And they are 12.5-point favorites. And then you've got Michigan State, who is floundering. For all of the Michigan State fans that said Tuck coming.
Including me.
Yeah, you did. In fact, you picked him to win the Big Ten, and I wish I would have made a side wager on that. I knew you were nuts, but the fact of the matter is Tuck going, and he is not favored here. Of course, Michigan is at home in Ann Arbor. That is the Saturday night game. Michigan by 22 points. Yeah. Now, we're also picking, instead of NFL games of the week, we're going to pick the 2 Phillies games, both 8:03, Friday and Saturday night. The Astros favored by 1.5 runs, game 1. We do know now that is going to be Zach Wheeler. We believe Aaron Nola to be game 2. The lines on Caesars Sportsbook, which we use for this podcast, and remember, we record this on Wednesdays. Right now, the line is not out for game 2. Houston is minus 190 to win the series, which means that Vegas thinks they are the hands-down favorites here, and it's not a surprise. I mean, I'm not sure the Phillies have been favored in any series to start this postseason because of how the Cardinals have played, and the Braves, for goodness sake, and then the Padres, but the Astros minus 190 to win the whole series. So now let's talk some weather.
Yes.
We want to get into this because, Dan, talk to me about what's going on across the country here this Halloween weekend.
Well, the middle part of this week is still featuring a lot of leftover clouds for the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic, and all signs point to that area of low pressure finally moving out, finally being less of a concern for the region. But that one area of disturbed weather gets replaced by another slow-moving low over the south, and this could have an impact on the Phillies game if you are traveling. Now, obviously, Houston has a retractable dome there.
Minute Maid Park, yeah.
Minute Maid Park, so that shouldn't be an overall big factor, but watch where that rain goes heading into Saturday, into parts of SEC country, and then across the way as we go into NFL Sunday. And there is this pesky leftover
Coastal
low,
junk.
Over the Carolinas, near the Mid-Atlantic. It's something we're going to have to watch because, as we just saw this past week, these things tend to be problematic. They tend to be slow-moving, and even if you don't get a ton of rain from them, it can lead to a damp, cooler forecast.
It can. So I would say Texas, Oklahoma, and points east may have some rain to contend with over the weekend. So let's break it down for you by city now, because we've got Ann Arbor, State College, and Knoxville. These are our 3 college games, and where do we start? I mean, it looks pretty nice, at least on Saturday for all these games.
It does. Now, Knoxville will see more clouds than farther to the north, but a really nice day there in Rocky Top. State College weather will not be a factor, which, again, I think favors James Franklin and Mike Yursich, that they can run the offense they want to run and not be impeded by weather. It does start a little bit cool in State College for you tailgaters and anyone sitting in traffic to get up to Happy Valley, but notice it's much warmer to the south. Knoxville should be a very nice day, albeit on the cloudier side as clouds increase throughout the day. And those showers aren't that far away, but no model guidance shows the rain moving in that fast for the Tennessee game.
No, the Tennessee game is at night, remember. So I think they're going to be okay. But it does look pretty pleasant here for those 3 locations on Saturday. Just a classic fall day. In terms of wind, I mean, there's really no weather systems at play, so I don't anticipate the wind to be a big factor either. Probably good news for James Franklin, probably good news for Kentucky. They may need a field goal in that game to keep it close. So that's the good news. Now, you mentioned Houston and the issues there. On Friday, Houston is going to have some storms around. They're going to have to make a call about closing that roof. It will probably be shut at Minute Maid Park. The only other thing I would say is if you're flying to Houston, that may be an issue late Thursday into Friday.
Right.
And I know some Phillies fans are, no doubt.
They travel.
They do. And then on Saturday for the game, kind of cloudy. But they should get these games in because of that roof.
I think so. And again, the biggest worry would be heavier rain. As you saw, they could play through light rain in Pennsylvania in a colder day there in game 5. But just notice what's going on here in Houston. That system does move out by the time we get into Saturday, so that shouldn't be much of an issue. It's actually a little bit cooler down in Houston than I would have thought leading into this series. They're getting enough cool air behind this system that temperature's only in the low 70s.
Yeah.
By game time Saturday.
Right, and that is cool for them. But it may be breezy. But again, without that roof open, I'm not sure how much the winds are going to be a factor here in these games. So, again, it's going to come down to pitching and hitting, obviously, in baseball. All right, picks. Boy, this is interesting. Despite all of our compliments to Penn State and the way that they've played Ohio State, I mean, Ohio State just seems like they are on a different level. And until Penn State can prove it to me and shock the world here, listen, they've done it before. They could do it again.
And I would love it if they do.
We're both taking Ohio State to cover the number.
Now, I say this with a caveat. I think the game will be close, similar to the Michigan game, through at least 3 quarters. Now, I think the 4th quarter, Ohio State could pull away. I think Penn State's depth will be tested the farther they go into the game. I think Ohio State does pull away in the end.
You and I differ on Kentucky-Tennessee. That's the Saturday evening game on ESPN, and you're picking Mark Stoops. Now, remember, Dan, this is at Tennessee. You have picked against Tennessee before at your own peril. What makes you think Stoopsy can go in there and at least cover the 12.5?
What I'm concerned about with Tennessee is not their offense. It's their defense. They give up a lot of points. And so my question is, can they slow down Will Levis enough? This seems like a big line for as big of a game as this is going to be. So I pick Kentucky to cover.
Kentucky, though, reminds me a lot of Penn State in a way. They're a gritty team, and they win some games, but when the big spotlight is on, and they've had some trouble with Tennessee, even when Tennessee's been down. So I like Heupel and Hooker here. I wrote in the column this week, which, again, you can find later today and into the weekend on ABC27.com. Heupel and Hooker, the best duo since Cagney and Lacey. They are just going to go in there, and I think they're going to kind of roll over Will Levis in Kentucky. You're right. It's a big number in their defense, but I think Kentucky tends to wear down, and I just like what Tennessee has right now. One of the few games we disagree on.
The only thing that I will caution about is Tennessee has not been in this position before either.
Correct.
My question is...
But Josh Heupel has.
Yes, Josh Heupel has. My question is, can they keep it together enough on their staff, on their team, to kind of bring their egos down and say, this is a must-win. Everything's a must-win for them to get into the playoff at this point.
Okay, I may have an interesting side wager on this.
Okay.
We'll come back to that. Just this has been done. I've seen a couple of the national folks do it, but it may have something to do with Will Levis, and we'll talk about that coming up.
Okay.
Michigan State, Michigan. Saturday night prime time. Mel Tucker, your friend.
My friend.
Goes into Ann Arbor, and you are picking him to get his butt kicked.
I just think, based on what we saw with the potential of Michigan and their 2 running backs, and even their play at quarterback has changed dramatically, Michigan may not put up an overwhelming amount of points, but I'm not sure Michigan State can score very much either.
I think that's what it comes down to. Typically in this game, Michigan State is going to want to out-physical Michigan, and they have many a time and caught them off guard. They kind of have done to Michigan what Michigan did to Penn State in the last game over the years. But this year, I just don't think they have the horses to do it. I mean, you watch them, and they just aren't that great of a football team. Michigan looks like they are.
I agree.
So, again, prove me wrong, but until then, I'm going to take that number. I know it's a big number, but I think they can do it. Again, the Phillies and the Astros here, the Phillies favored by 1.5. That's a very standard baseball line. Baseball, hard to bet. However, here's the situation. We know the Phillies and Rob Thompson, and he's been really adept at managing these types of situations. They have to get one.
They have to get one.
So they don't need two, but they need to get one. As far as we know, as of this recording, which is Wednesday, Wheeler will pitch game 1, Nola will pitch game 2. I like the odds that the Phillies can win and cover 1.5 runs with Wheeler a little bit better because Wheeler's going against Verlander. You know what Verlander's ERA is?
Minuscule.
Well, no.
Well, not in the playoffs, but in
ERA,
general.
Yeah, but his ERA in the playoffs, and I wrote about this in the column.
He's got some notes.
Got some notes here. Just want to, okay, this postseason, Zach Wheeler, 2.82.
Phenomenal.
Verlander, 6.30.
Yeah, he's had a little bit of a clunker, but they haven't lost because of it, which is interesting.
No, they haven't. But I also, again, I'm not sure they've played great teams.
No,
not that Philly's a great team, but we're hot right now.
The Yankees weren't at full strength. I
Yes.
think that was a big part of it, but they still swept them, which is pretty impressive. And by the way, Seattle was giving them a run for their money until Mr. Alvarez came up and hit a no-doubter with 2 outs and I believe 2 strikes on him.
I just have a feeling that if Wheeler is on his A game, even if the Phillies can score 3 or 4, we might be okay and be able to get out of there. We are both picking the Phillies to cover Friday night.
I think they win game 1 no matter who's on the mound. For whatever reason, they've done well in game 1. I think this would be their 7th in a row.
Well,
check me on that. Is that correct?
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
It's either 7 or 8 in a row they've won game 1 of
when
playoff
they're in the
series.
postseason. Yeah.
I will say this much: if it's Nola, I feel just as good. But
Sure.
maybe not.
He did struggle in game 2 against the Padres.
He might not go more than 5 innings. He seems to have trouble the 3rd time through the lineup.
You also have to believe that Houston, as good as they are, will take one of these.
I agree, and I don't know again everything about their starting rotation, but I know they have some horses. They have some younger guys with good stuff. I think it's going to keep the Phillies off balance.
It will be interesting, and maybe while you're looking that up, Dave, who do we think is going to pitch game 2 for the Astros? I've got him stumped, but I don't know if they've said anything either.
It could be Valdez. It could be.
Yeah, they do not have it listed as of this time.
As of this recording, no, and that's what makes it interesting because that's why there's no line on that game. They don't know really who the pitching matchup is going to be officially yet for game 2.
The one thing to remember too is the game that they won to get into the playoffs was against those same Houston Astros, and that was the first game of a 3-game series. So
that is how the season ended.
That was then they kind of laid off a little once they knew they were in. But I think they got a chance, especially if these guys are hitting fastballs, and there's no one that throws more fastballs than Verlander.
According to MLB.com, just so we're putting out the facts of the way we see it right now, it is Aaron Nola for game 1 listed. Game 2
is it?
Zach Wheeler.
Because I had read earlier that Wheeler they wanted him to go in game 1.
It could be just an extra day of rest. Hopefully his arm's not barking. Hopefully
Okay,
that's not a situation.
That is very interesting because.
And by the way, they are still TBD for the Astros on MLB.com
for game
1.
Well, but now again, this is contrary to what I read earlier today. Is it possible? Now, remember, we're recording this on Wednesday. Is it possible that sometimes these managers are trying to play some games here, too?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just telling you what is out there officially. Now, again, there could be Framber Valdez pitching game 1 or 2 for the Astros. Lance McCullers came back from injury but didn't look great. Christian Javier is also very, very good for the Houston Astros. Luis Garcia, another possible starter. But there's a man on the Houston Astros that Phillies fans are very familiar with. His name is Hector Neris.
Yes, welcome home, Hector. And you just know that he's either going to burn us or we're going to hit him like crazy. I would never have thought I would say I miss Hector Neris, but What if he comes back and bites us in the World Series?
It could certainly happen. It seems like old Phillies tend to roost from time to time.
Well, we are going to go with Philly in Game 1, correct?
I'm going Philly game 1 no matter
Yeah,
what. Again,
and
I think it's 7 or 8 in a row that they have won. If they win,
Yeah, and then
Game
we're gonna take the Astros here to get the win in Game 2. So that's how it looks, and that is both of those are, as we mentioned, Saturday and Sunday in Friday and Saturday, in Houston.
and then they come home.
Sunday's the travel day, and then away they go. All right, moving on here.
It is time to go
Under the radar.
We are keeping our theme here with Pennsylvania sports, and this maybe isn't necessarily an under-the-radar game, but with the Phillies in the World Series,
It is kind of flying under the radar a bit.
it is, and the Steelers stink, so this is kind of under the radar. The Eagles are 11-point favorites. My goodness.
Can you imagine?
No.
I didn't see that coming into this year, Kenny Pickett or not. I did not see the Eagles coming into this game 11. That's huge in the NFL to have a spread like that.
Yeah, well, when you don't have a quarterback and the Steelers are in transition, and I know some Steeler fans annoy me, and
Are they front runners?
well, they annoy me because they have the most rings.
They do.
They have just year after year, you can count on them to have, other than this year apparently, but year after year, you can count on 10 or 11 wins.
A
They're
winning
in the
season,
playoffs. Yep. And they just don't trust Mike Tomlin, and they just whine.
I love Mike Tomlin.
They whine about him.
Who I don't believe has had a losing season yet, right?
Nope.
I mean, 500
I
was
believe
his,
that's correct.
his
Right,
worst
and I'm thinking,
year.
you guys just don't know what you have. You just don't know what you have. And every year
Consistency,
it's
right.
Mike Tomlin. So if they, if they stink this year, okay, go back to the draft and go at it.
I've always said,
what's the big deal?
if he ever leaves the Steelers and James Franklin for some reason isn't the coach of Penn State, I would love to see Mike Tomlin at State College.
Yeah,
Love it.
I don't think that'll ever happen, but
Just saying,
I like it.
that's
I like him.
That's my affinity for him. I like him.
no. Well, what's not to like? That's my point. But Steeler fans are spoiled.
Do you want a Brandon Staley? Do you want that guy, whatever his name is, down in Miami, that little guy?
Mike McDonald?
Forget him. These guys are analytics. They don't care about the game itself. They just
No, and again, what has Mike Tomlin done? He's getting you to 2 Super Bowls, and he just wins most of the time. So, and by the way, if the roster's tight right now, I'm not sure that's necessarily his fault.
no.
But when we look at this game, some clouds. We do expect it to stay dry now on Sunday.
We do, but again, that coastal low could play some type of role here. It could be kind of a cool, damp start to the game, could linger throughout the game. It's something to monitor. That east wind, which has been problematic for our local forecast over the past week, it'll be back by Sunday, coming off the water 5 to 10 miles per hour. Again, shouldn't be a game changer, but just not the prettiest day for tailgating and for game action.
No, but it is a fall day in Philadelphia. That is for sure. So what is our pick for this? Again, pretty obvious. We're both going the Eagles to cover here, not just because we're fans, but again, they are playing a pretty hapless team.
Could we see Gardner Minshew for the first time this year?
Maybe
If it
by
turns
quarter
into
4.
a blowout. Yeah, we'll have to see.
Got a nice mustache.
He does,
right?
and he's a gamer.
He
I
is.
kind of want to see him in a game at some point.
I still think you have better facial hair, though,
Well, thank you.
than Gardner Minshew.
I don't dance around like he does, though. He's an
Well,
excitable guy.
He is, but I would take your facial hair over his any day. All right, let's move on. Another segment, and we go now to...
Time now for Brett's Best.
You're coming in hot.
I'm coming in hot because I switched these at the last minute on you. I don't know if you noticed this.
I did notice this. This is an interesting take.
Yeah, TCU coming into those country roads of Morgantown, West
This is
Virginia.
a sleepy matchup. This is one of those look-ahead type of matchups.
I am nervous about it, but at the same point, what Sonny Dykes is doing and Max Dugan, just
Unreal.
they are a playoff contender in my opinion.
Look at the over-under for that game.
69 points.
That is a Big 12 nightmare.
Yeah, I like that. It is indeed. Oregon, California, quack, quack. The Ducks are back.
Big emotional win for the Oregon Ducks. Can they keep pace?
Are you trying to throw salt on my picks or what?
I'm just saying. These are tough games.
They
Tougher
are.
than they look
They
on
are,
the
but
surface.
well, maybe. But I think West Virginia and California stink. Okay, Broncos.
Speaking of stink,
Yeah, Broncos, the Denver Broncos, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, by the way, let me just read you a sample of the column.
poor Doug Peterson. It's falling apart.
Well, yeah, they're 2-5. I still like this team, but look, this is what I wrote. Okay, there are some bad NFL teams out there, and this week several matchups feature two against one another. This just happens to be one with 2-5 teams squaring off, and to make it worse, the NFL is sending them to London. Now another country must suffer through terrible football.
Again, this is supposed to be a showcase, and we're sending that over there?
Probably not the best way to grow the game internationally, but hey, it can't be worse than soccer, right? Actually, it can.
I think it can.
The Broncos and Jaguars fans may vote to keep their teams in London if that was an option. And I also wrote, if there's one saving grace here, it's that this game is on streaming, ESPN Plus to be exact. When fans can't find a game, there's complaining, there's Twitter meltdowns. This week, fans are probably going to be relieved they can't find this one.
I was going to say, I don't even have ESPN Plus. I have a lot of the streaming services. That is one I have not bought into yet.
Yep, they get one game a year. This is the game. I'm sure they overpaid for it. Look at that. I mean,
don't ask Al Michaels.
That is ugly football.
Is Russ going to be playing in that game too?
Or is it?
I don't think
Ryan
it matters.
Ripien, or however you say his name?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. But leave
God.
them
Fish
both.
and chips will keep them happy.
Maybe, but
Hey,
leave them.
According to our own Dennis Owens, there are cheesesteaks in London. I have to find out about this.
Well, listen, no matter what, they can both stay there. All right, let's get into Doppler Dandies.
It's Doppler Dandies.
You may look at this first game and say, well, that one's obvious. But I will say Kansas State was kind of the darling coming into this year. Now they have 2 losses. Oklahoma State and our boy Mike Gundy has 1.
Mr. Mullet.
Oklahoma State looked pretty good against Texas.
Yes.
And I think this could be finally the year they break through. I keep saying it about the Cowboys.
But they have to go to Manhattan.
They do have to go to Manhattan.
Bill
the Little Apple.
Snyder Family Stadium.
They do. And, Chris Kleiman is an excellent coach, but I worry about them. I think this could be the nail in the coffin for their Big 12 run. So wait and see. Now, the second game I find very entertaining because South Carolina may be one of the biggest surprise 2-loss teams, especially in the SEC. They are 5-2 going up against Missouri. Can they keep up the momentum? They just knocked off Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M.
Shane Beamer.
Like what he's doing, and apparently there were some extracurriculars going on in the Texas A&M locker room. That's a whole different story.
Peanut butter and jelly?
No, this was a different substance.
Was James Franklin to blame for that?
Well, maybe according to Jim Harbaugh.
Okay.
So there's that, and then finally the Bears Cowboys.
Well, hold on. We have a Cowboys game, and we have our guy over here. Take that under. Listen, the Bears stink, and I know what they just did Monday night, but got to go with George here. Take the under on this, right?
I take the under, and it's a pretty big spread there, 42.5. Cowboys by 9.5 points with Dak Prescott, who played a better second half last week, but they were down early in that game.
Is Cooper back on the bench?
Well, poor Cooper. I think his run is done.
All right. So it is now time to reveal our
Final picks.
So here they are, and this would include our Brett's Best and Doppler Dandies. Again, we don't have a lot of differences this week. We both have Ohio State covering the 15.5. Tennessee, Kentucky. We differ on that one, and I want to come back to that one. We've got Michigan, -22, both of us. Phillies in Game 1 to cover the 1.5 runs. Astros money line in Game 2. Eagles to cover. I am going to take all the favorites here. I'm just going to take a slew of them down. Just going to take a slew of favorites. TCU to cover the 7.5. Something's wrong with Neil Brown's West Virginia team. I don't think they can do it.
I think he's in hot water.
I think he is. I think if he continues to lose, he's on the hot seat. I absolutely wrote that in the column this week. Oregon, yes, I agree with you. But again, California, I mean, if this was maybe somebody that had a pulse, I don't like it. They go to Berkeley, they get the 17, and Jacksonville, 2.5 on the road in London.
Doug.
I am, and again, they could lay an egg here, but I just like him in this spot, and I like the team. I think that we saw them play the Eagles. They have some talent, and I like the coach. I'm going to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars to cover the 2.5. So you are picking Mike Gundy.
I am picking Mike Gundy. It's a close line. It's kind of a coin flip game, in my opinion, just because there is no defense in the Big 12, so this could be a lot of fun. Run and gun. South Carolina, I picked Shane Beamer to keep on winning. I mean, they are bowl eligible.
All
with
aboard
a win.
the Shane train.
I love it. I love it. I liked Will Muschamp too there, but Shane's really got him cooking.
Okay, now despite George telling you what to do, you are taking the Bears
I am. To at least cover.
to cover, but you could take the under and win.
I could take the under and win. However, Justin Fields showed me something against the Patriots. I mean, that's against Bill Belichick.
You're right. I mean, what's not to love about that?
And
All
we
right.
know the guy has talent. Remember, he was a Franklin recruit back in the day.
Okay, here's my side wager.
All right, let's hear it.
Pull us up on camera here. This is as we wrap things up.
Yeah, what do you got for me?
Tennessee, Kentucky.
Uh-huh.
Mark Stoops, Will Levis.
Yep.
Now, you know that Will Levis is an interesting bird.
No, I do. He's a human battering ram. He's a huge human.
I've seen some people try this out.
Okay.
And I think this should be the side wager this week. Will Levis allegedly puts a secret ingredient in his coffee.
Is that right?
Have you heard of this?
No, I have not.
Perfect. He likes to, instead of putting cream in his coffee, he will put mayonnaise in his coffee. And he squirts it in there, mixes it around, and downs the cup of coffee. So whoever wins this game the loser of this has to sit here and drink a whole cup of coffee throughout the pod next week with mayonnaise in it.
Deal.
Okay. There it is.
Good for you guys, man. I'm not touching that.
No,
I
listen.
wonder how did that get started? Who figures that out?
I don't know, but I've seen it. It was online a couple of years ago. I've had some other people online. I've seen them try this concoction out.
I thought you were going to say a whole egg. I could see that as kind of like a protein thing, but
Does he do that?
no, but that would make a little more sense to me than
Just
mayo.
down
I
an
mean,
egg. No, it's mayonnaise in coffee. Now, you know they do use mayonnaise in, like, cakes.
Well, yeah, it's a dairy product.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there is egg in mayo, but I've never thought of that as something nutritious that an athlete's eating.
No, and somehow I just knew that this had escaped you because, we all are bombarded with information. I didn't think, because I felt like we would have talked about this had you known about this.
It's definitely a weird thing.
So I like that I caught you off guard here. So that's this is a bet, a side wager involving Kentucky. Mayonnaise coffee
now,
next
week, I'm going to be away from the studios.
Oh, you're right.
So I will do
Okay.
my best to try to fulfill it next week, but if not, the week
No.
following.
We'll do. Let's do 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Let me mark that down. 2 weeks,
Take the under.
because you're going to be away. We're still going to have a podcast next week.
Yep, we're going to do remotely.
But you'll be back at this desk 2 weeks.
Indeed.
Mayonnaise coffee. Okay, everybody, enjoy the Penn State noon kick against Ohio State. Enjoy the Phillies Friday night and Saturday night. World Series bound Philadelphia Phillies. Email us more side wager suggestions, weatherwagers@gmail.com. Hit us up online. What a fun show. Our thanks to David Shiner for chiming in and for helping us out
Thanks
with
for
the
having me.
audio. Dave, always a pleasure.
Give a wave, Dave.
Give a wave to Dave.
Love that overhead shot.
Dan, thank you.
Thank you.
Final word. Go Phillies.
Go Phillies.